Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to another show, Trina Bolden Fields. I am your host, and I'm here with the fabulous Matthew Reynolds. Welcome, Matthew. It's good to have
Trina,
you.
oh, thank you. Thank you. It's good to be on.
Thank you. And today we're talking about shifting the consciousness of humanity and moving beyond the fail, is what we're talking about today. I'm excited to have Matthew with us today because Matthew has lived in different communities, different parts of the world. Matthew has you've honed your skills, Matthew, for communication, for training, for seeing and activating different perspectives. And you're a new author, right? And so we're going to be talking a bit about that. And even before doing that, you were a teacher in the classroom. And after being a teacher in the classroom, you started a business to help people craft their equity lens. And then you decided to write this book.
I
Go
didn't
ahead.
just decided to write this book. I was inspired to write this book, and I was inspired by our conversations and the work that we were doing together. And when you brought up fail as our topic today, first attempt in learning, I was like, yes, eager to talk about this because it's all wrapped in to everything from the time that we started working and you said, I hear the title of a book. And then you repeated that a few times as I was trying to like duck and weave and get out of the way and be like, no, I don't, you're not talking to me. That it can't be me that you're talking to. And then I really let it sink in, kind of thing. And then it blossomed into what it is. And biggest, fullest, brightest, shifting the consciousness of humanity. And so thank you for that. And yeah, let's talk.
Let's talk. Thank you. And I want to ask this question because you brought it up, because you talked about this book and the title of it kind of settling in with you. But what made you go in and what made you say yes and go ahead and birth this book to bring it to fruition?
I believe that we all have our own journey, right? We're all at a different place, a different perspective. Our lived experience is what we should really look at to guide us. So instead of getting trapped by our past, like a lot of us do, it's like, oh, that situation, feeling regret, feeling shame, feeling guilt. I really started to flip that mindset and be like, no, a lot of the past is based on someone else's perception of me or what someone told me my perception of myself should be. And so it was all based on these lies that wasn't even my work to be doing. So I really started honing the skill of the past is my education and really being educated by it. So when we were working and we were looking at a lot of the different aspects of what I offer now, crafting your equity lens and what I wanted to put out there, how I wanted to put it out there, what was the structure of my workshops, how I was building and scaffolding things on top of each other, I was applying those things to myself as well. It's not that I'm sitting on some high pedestal being like, and now that's going to happen, and now that's going to happen. I really allowed myself to be in it, to move through it, to be a part of it, to continue now even to be working on myself and on a lot of these aspects. And so within that, I really landed on this idea of worth and being worthy. And it was something that I had seen before. I bought a t-shirt and a hoodie that said worthy on it so that I could remind myself of it, but I had not begun to live it fully. And when we started working and started really digging these things, digging into this idea and bringing this offering forward, bringing my purpose more forward into the world to live and have its existence, I really allowed myself to step in that worthiness. And when I stepped into the worthiness, I was like, yeah, this book should be written and I'm going to write it. And so teamed up with a partner of mine, fellow colleague from before, Brittany Warren, and we sat down and she helped guide me. And in a year and a half, the book was written.
Beautiful. You stepped into that worthiness
Yes.
and did the work you mentioned. And you talked about like having perspectives that came into play in the beginning and needing to decide what was your work. And so a question came up for me was deciding what was your work and what was not. How did you go about doing that? How do you recommend, you know, that we go about doing that, of deciding what is ours to work on and work through and what is not?
Excellent question. And it's taken many filters and many different tools, tools in the toolbox or toys in the toolbox, depending on what language you choose to use or how you are feeling in a particular day. And I got these tools by listening to others, actively listening and hearing how they had gone through and worked through similar situations to mine, getting this advice from others, trying that advice on for myself, seeing what worked for me and what didn't, um, seeking out professional help, having a therapist for a number of years, still having a therapist, finally having a therapist of color. That all shifted a lot of the work and helped establish some of the tools that I had in my toolkit. And being able to journal, being introspective, not being stuck though, spending so much time just being introspective that I'm not actually living my life, allowing this authenticity, this authentic self that's coming forward in the world to actually have an existence in the world. That's an important part of it too. But I think the biggest thing is to just look in that mirror and ask yourself, how much of my thinking is my thinking? None of us were born talking negatively about ourselves, thinking that we're lesser than,
Mhm,
thinking that we don't deserve anything. We were all born with power and with dignity, right?
mhm,
And so
mhm,
if we're born with this power and with this dignity, what were the situations where that got lessened or got completely glossed over? And it's not this like, oh, right there, and I'm done.
mhm.
Because what's happened is those situations occurred, my thinking, cognitive brain shifted, and then I lived my life thinking a particular way for a number of years. So it was when I finally started having these realizations, it was this backwards thinking, right? It was like, oh, that's connected to that. I respond to the situation in this way. Oh, and that goes back to this. And I responded there in a similar way. And this was another, and this was another, and this goes all the way back to, oh, when I was really young, this occurred in my life. This was said to me, and I believed that. And I took that on. And that became my way of thinking about myself when it wasn't my thinking about myself. My brain wasn't at a point yet. And so I've been able to take the work that far back. But along that process, all those stops along the way were that onion that I talked about before, where I'm peeling off these different layers and more of my authentic self is coming to the surface. So
Mhm.
the first place to start, ask yourself, how much of my thinking is my thinking? And that's not to say that's not mine to work on. That's not mine to work on, because that's something that shadow says to us too, is that
Yeah.
it doesn't afford us accountability. So how
Mhm.
am I being in integrity with myself? How do I hold myself accountable to the
Yeah.
truth of who I am?
Definitely. What you talked about of understanding your thinking and your thought process and how that was formed, and understanding that it was tied to something previously, and that way of being and acting in the world wasn't fully fleshed out. It wasn't really you. Or I think about this because I'm in the midst of writing some work of my own, and I'm looking at these way of thinking and how I had written this specific passage some time ago, and I'm like, that thinking was insanity. Right, when I'm looking back on it now, right, that was just absolutely insane. And I think it's such a wonderful thing for me to be able to look at it now and then give it a different perspective, give it a different, give it that extra layer, and a new level of understanding, and be able to really share that in that writing of that piece. So
Yes.
that has been your experience.
Yes, being able to honor where I come from, where I am now, and also acknowledging my future. And I want to be inspired by that future. A
Yeah.
lot of folks, and myself included, it's like nose down to the grindstone, got to be working, got to be making money to be able to survive, to have a roof over the head, blah, blah, blah. All those things that the status quo tells us that are
Mhm,
basic human needs, right? But we
mhm,
work so hard just to have those things in our life. And then
mhm,
we judge it by the status quo standards that
Mhm.
we should have more things. And when we don't, we tell ourselves that we're not successful, and so then we're reinforcing that thought process or some of those things that we were told at a younger age. And
Mhm.
some of us, it's the flip of it, that
Mhm.
I've been so selfish and so self-absorbed and only thinking about myself, that when all of a sudden that isn't the case anymore, and that I need to look out, or I need to be looking at others, or part of a team, or part of a situation that has multiple people to it, and everybody thinks that I'm just being a jerk,
Mhm.
kind of thing, because I don't know how to connect to others. And then the myriad of ways in between those two extremities that I just gave. There's all this lived experience that occurs. Honoring the truth of who you are is so important, and that we've grown, that I'm a different person than I was at the start of this conversation, because I'm
Mhm.
making connections and I'm actively listening to you, Trina, and you're inspiring more thought process in my head. And I'm going, oh, wow, maybe now I'm ready to hear it this way, to
Mhm.
connect it this way, to be
Mhm.
inspired by it this way.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, definitely. What comes for me, and this is what I share a lot of times, is that when I'm talking to people about the work that we're doing as adults, or even about the education system and how kids are being um, taught today, and then the sheer amount of instruction or homework that's happening. And I say, our brains need a break. Kids daydream. We daydream because our brains need a break. We need an opportunity to reflect on a bit of learning that's coming to our lives, or that aspect, or maybe what an instructor just said. Um, our brains need a moment to breathe that in, right? Like, just like we take a breath, our brains need a moment to process. And so what you just shared just brought me to that, and how important it is for us to give ourselves that grace and that time and space
yes,
to do that.
yes, it's a huge
Definitely.
part of it. Giving, and when we say that I think a lot of times people, when they hear grace, or people who have that word in their vocabulary in their life, because a lot of us don't, right? I did Grace. I thought was not for me, because I didn't even think I was worthy of that, right?
Hmm.
I thought,
Hmm.
oh, it's something that I give to someone else, that I'm in
Yeah.
service and giving grace to other people, and then that's on the road to forgiveness, or on the road to, whatever it might be. And it's like, well, wait a minute, what about giving myself grace in the
Right.
ways that you talked about, giving myself a break to apply the learning that I'm having by living my life, right? Letting
Yeah.
this new authentic person come forward and make mistakes, and have joyous moments, and have sadness and grief, and have, all these various emotions that make us human and live in the
Hmm.
world. I think that that's a
Hmm.
huge part of it. Giving ourselves grace too. Yes. Yes and yes.
Definitely. Definitely. And I had mentioned that I'm listening to you about that grace and about what's necessary. And from your own story, you had to endure quite a bit. I mean, you talk about that in your upcoming book, your forthcoming book, about what you went through, um, as a child to an African American father
Mhm.
who grew up in the South.
Yes.
And I'm coming to this point because I just had a thought that maybe we should start there. I know we were going to talk about moving Phil forward, but then I was like, maybe we should start there and give a little bit of work through that, because of thinking about grace and giving yourself grace. Because I think even in your story and your writing, you've given this situation, you've shed a light on it, but even given this grace as you've processed it.
Right. And I think that that's part of, knowingly or unknowingly, when the birth of supremacy culture began in the 1450s, the first iterations of racist thought or language was written out,
Mhm.
and the construct of white and whiteness, and how that continues to be upheld, that constant oppressive idea that you are part of the marginalized group that's lesser than,
Mhm.
it feeds into this thought process. Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about, specifically in her book, Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome. She's talking about this idea that there's it's a form of PTSD, that
Mhm.
slavery is continued within the African American culture to this day, and continues to uphold a lot of this thought process about self and how we feel about self. From my father, from an academic perspective, only had an eighth grade education,
Mhm.
right? From
Mhm.
a survival, protect my family perspective, he did not want to talk about what happened to him back in the
Mhm.
day. He did
Mhm.
not talk about that. I don't know who his friends were. I don't know if there were joyous moments when he was a child, et cetera, et cetera. So none of that got passed on to me. I didn't have anything to kind of gauge my manhood off of, how I
Mhm.
should be a man in the world, let alone a queer identified man, and being able to be open and discuss that with my father. So I didn't
Mhm.
really have any gauges except for what was physically happening in the world around me, what was auditorily happening in the world around me, all the name calling, all the yelling, the physical abuse, the mental and psychological abuse, et cetera, et cetera. All those things were constantly being fed to me, along with marketing, along with what the person behind the pulpit was saying to me in church on Sunday, behind what other people, when I went to different schools or different education or part of different programs, etc. I'm constantly being barraged with this thing that I was lesser than. No wonder
Right.
I had no self-worth, right?
Yeah.
No wonder it
Yeah.
was completely dissolved and not even
Yeah.
there, to the point where I didn't know that I could give myself grace. I thought dignity, and this happened just in the last 3 years, where I realized, oh, I have dignity. I
Mhm.
thought dignity, the definition and everything, was for royals or those in a certain social economic bracket. I didn't think that dignity was tied into my humanity, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
didn't really know that until I understood, when they took away the belt from um, Muhammad Ali, right? For
Mhm.
him being like, you know what? You can keep all those things, but you can't take away my dignity. And
Mhm.
that's where that Whitney Houston made the song famous, but she wasn't
Yeah.
the original. But that line, it's because we're all born with dignity. We all have dignity. And
Right.
that was really where a lot of the work with a capital W was happening in all of me, mind, body,
Mhm.
and spirit. Really
Mhm.
had to grapple with that, because there's so much stimuli telling me otherwise and trying to
Right.
continue to oppress me and hold me down.
Mhm. And I think the biggest point is that you get to make up your mind, make up your own mind, make a decision after you've done your work as to what you're going to move forward in life. And I
Yes.
think that the idea of biggest, fullest, brightest um, came up in that, right?
Yes, that's exactly where it came up. And
Hmm.
then the extra part of shifting the consciousness of humanity,
Yeah.
that's a huge part of it, because there's millions, billions possibly, of us that are living this marginalized life, where
Right.
we're constantly being fed that we're lesser than, being
Right.
held up to somebody else's standard of what it means to be human. We are
Right.
all a human being. We
And
all,
what it
yep.
is to be human and what it is to be accepted.
Well, not only accepted, I've got to accept me. And
You
that's an important part of it.
right.
That grace tying in, all of these things being able to say to ourselves first, because I wasn't even seeing my humanity.
Right. And I'm also saying, because I know we have to see each other's humanity is where you're saying, but also saying having a place for belonging, right? For people to see that humanity in you um, is another aspect of that.
It's a huge aspect of that, but I don't feel, this is interesting. Thank you for this thought process. I don't feel that there are people, because of what I've written in the book, I don't
Hmm.
feel that people really can understand what belonging is, or what they need for belonging to happen, because they've done so much to fit in, meaning they've left so many different aspects of who they are at the
Hmm.
door. Even they don't even put it back on as they leave spaces that they find themselves in. It's like, I've got to keep my head down. I'm here to survive. I've got to make it through another day. Yes, that that racist, homophobic, misogynistic person is constantly saying things that are like, I hear them and HR doesn't do anything about all these things, right? It's like, if I'm constantly in that, I don't even think that I'm empowered enough to be able to dream of a place of belonging. I
Mhm.
just stopped that it even exists, that I'm
Mhm.
going to be able to do that, right? And
Yeah.
so, this fullest, brightest, shifting that consciousness, if we're going to live our biggest, fullest, and brightest life, we need to define for ourselves, what does belonging look like? What
Mhm.
does community look like?
Mhm.
I say that I have these things here and there, but do I?
Mhm.
How do I define it? And ask myself honestly, how do I define belonging? What do I need to have in that room for me to feel a sense of belonging, that I can truly bring my authentic self there?
Right.
Because
You know,
a lot of folks are asking for that, especially companies and corporations right now, the education system, but
right.
it's this, we want you to be this, but we're not going to empower you to really do that. But we're going to say that that's what we want because those are the new buzzwords and we should be saying those things, but we're really not going to create a situation where that can occur.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. And I, as you were speaking, I'm thinking about, I have two teens.
Yes.
I do, and those teens, boy, they're awesome. Um, and my youngest one is so unapologetic about how she is in her space. And I say that because I was reminded of being around that age of my children, and I, had learned, what marginalized really meant. And I remember I used to tell my mother when she would tell me things or ask me to go do things, I would say to her, I will not be marginalized. I was practicing it. She thought it was funny for me to be practicing that at home. But I was practicing my understanding of that, right? Even though it was, with mom and going back and forth. But now that I'm thinking about these young people that I've raised, that they have that as a strong aspect of who they are and their identity, and how important it is for us to be able to see our own humanity and the humanity of others around us.
Yes.
Um, and to stand in that, and what you were sharing earlier, not to leave pieces of ourselves. And I think about the goodness of who we are just to appease somebody's thought or perception of who we should be or what we should be doing.
Yes. And think now, stay on that line of thought.
Mm,
And in the course of a day, if if you need to leave your home and go someplace else for work and be
yeah,
with other human beings there,
yeah,
right? Who may not
mhm,
all think the same way of you, how much that gets chipped away at, gets
yeah,
deteriorated. And then at the end of the day, it's like, I'm just going to go along with that. It's been happening so much. I'm just going to
right,
go along with it. So where do we
right,
find that hope, right?
right,
Where,
right.
where do we
Because
allow
people,
to have some faith, right?
right? Yeah. I mean, people think that they have to conform or they have to be like this in order to, or to have this job, they must do things like this. I, um, I have to share this and then talk a bit about that faith with you because I was talking about faith earlier in a group today.
Mhm.
Um, but I have always been the person who didn't conform to the status quo in a work environment. Um, and I would have at times just supervisors in tears, like, Trina, why can't you just? And it's like, no, I'm not. And these are the reasons why. Very honest and very true. And I understand the aspect of getting work done. I will work very hard to get things done and get them done on time in the ways they should be with deep research and backing. That's
Mhm.
how my brain works strategically and research based, and I'm a planner, so I'll get it all in there.
Mhm.
Yet I'm not going to be the person that does it a certain way just because we've done it that way all the time previously.
Mhm.
Neither am I the person that's going to hold up that status quo when it's inappropriate or toxic against humanity.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Okay.
But think about that, Trina. I feel that supremacy culture has permeated so many aspects of society and our
Mhm,
socialization, and not just in the United States. I believe that the supremacy idea is worldwide. I mean, even from a political standpoint, we're seeing in the election in Italy, right? And we're seeing elections in other places that there's a big push from that conservative right fascist mindset and idea that there's pure blood out there, that there are people who are pure to a particular bloodline or nationality or whatever, and they should have more power than others. And that people shouldn't be able to live wherever they want to live or wherever they're drawn to live, that you should stay where you were born and where your people are at, right?
mhm,
So that permeation, that getting in there, I've noticed for myself, the more and more my authentic self comes forward, it's easier for me to see, and with the crafting of my equity lens, how I'm
mhm,
still upholding those ideas throughout the
mhm.
course of my day,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And usually these days, a lot of times it's with language
Mhm,
where I'm saying things that are um, upholding some kind of oppressive thought or idea about a particular group of people, be
mhm,
it from a homophobic perspective or be it something that is not necessarily anti-black, but just something that doesn't see somebody else's humanity is what I would
mhm,
come down to.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so I think that that's an important aspect of it too, that I realized, oh, am I just acting the ways that supremacy culture told me that I should fight against it? Or is the authentic me really done with it?
mhm,
How do I do that? Because that permeation, I feel, has gotten into a lot of us who are fighting for social justice, who are fighting to right some of these wrongs, who are fighting to bring everybody to an equal footing, to an equal place to have these things done. And I think that sometimes our language and the ways that we treat each other come out in a way that is still upholding supremacy culture. And
mhm.
just that's why always asking that question, how much of your thinking is your thinking?
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. Now tell me a bit about how the faith aspects come into this work for you with stepping into your humanity with pers- your perspective with shifting the consciousness of humanity.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I believe that my faith on many different levels and in many different ways has been uprooted and shooken out and looked at and burned the sacred cow and have a barbecue with it and all kinds of things because it's like, oh, what is what do I have faith in,
Mm,
especially as somebody who has who bought in for so many years
mhm,
everybody else's idea of me,
mhm,
right? And so for me, that faith comes from having a faith and a belief in myself.
mhm,
I've not, I've not, I've not even had 10 years. I've not even had 5 years, I think, yet of really believing myself to be worthy of having the things that I have in my life, of having the friends and family and acquaintances and other people that I've met, having the experiences that I've had, eating the foods that I've eaten, you know what I mean? Traveling where
mhm,
I have, being able to speak with people and it's like I haven't even had 5 years with that. So there's been years of not having any faith whatsoever. And so
mhm,
for me in doing this work and really shifting that consciousness for my own self, my faith comes from a belief in me.
mhm,
For me to believe in anything else, any other concept, any other being or idea, I have to believe in me.
mhm,
Believe in yourself. Be you.
mhm,
It's a Martin Luther King quote, right?
mhm, mhm,
That whole idea of, well, I've been listening to society tell me that I'm not. Now I'm starting to believe that I am. I'm just starting to believe in me. I want to have a faith in me that I'm on the right path. I want to
mhm,
have a faith in me that I have an understanding of my authentic self, that it's coming forward. I can give myself grace. I can be able to say, yeah, Shadow, I don't need your help right now. You can go take a seat. I hear you. I heard your voice. It's not the truth of me. I'm not going to listen to that. I have faith in the decisions that I'm making from this place of authenticity, and I'm going to
Right.
move that forward. And that's what faith for me is at this moment.
Mhm. That's beautiful. I'm thinking, Matthew, we need to sit together a little bit longer on that faith, me and you, in the time and work through that faith because I love it. And my conversation earlier today was really about all things being possible, right? And when we believe in our abilities and in ourselves and align our lives accordingly, we can create those possibilities for us, right? And that is individual to each and every person, right? And it's not what's outward
Yes.
in, it's what's inward out, and that's the point. That
Yes.
is so the point even now, because if you have that belief in yourself, look at all the beauty that you're able to create when you really show up for you, thinking
Mm,
about that,
mm, mm.
and being your biggest, fullest, and brightest, and
Yes.
working to shift humanity.
Yes.
I love it. That's the energy that we get to exude, and grow into. So I absolutely love it. I want to talk with you a little bit about the unapologetically me chapter, Black, Gay, Male, Human. I want to talk to you about this because you talked about faith. We talked about faith and believe it in you. And this is what this next aspect, this chapter is about, that unapologetically me. And um, today is coming out day, right?
Yes. Yes, it
So
is.
would like to hear more about that faith, that belief, being more of who you are and being able to share that with the world.
Yes. All of those qualifiers that I put down there, all of those things when someone asks me to share who I am, right? I'll say
Mhm,
those things because they are aspects of me. They are things that have shifted my own personal consciousness about how I see myself, how I see the world around me, how I see myself in the world. At times, any one of those things has been a cage and locked me down, and any
mhm,
one of those things have been wings and allowed me to fly.
mhm,
And so then I don't want it to be one or the other. I want to be able to see those moments as that education in my past, right?
mhm,
And know
mhm,
that these are bits and pieces of me. These are lived experiences and parts of me. And the more that I start to realize and come into the strength and the power of who I am unapologetically me.
mhm,
I'm not just this or this or this. I do not say that I speak for this group or that group or the other group. I am speaking my truth. I'm talking to you and have responses for you from my lived experience. I cannot speak for anyone else,
mhm,
right? Nor will
mhm,
I ever try to.
mhm,
I'm going to speak my truth, and I'm going to empower and encourage other people to do the same thing. That's that unapologetically me aspect
mhm,
of it. That
mhm,
I don't need to just be blasting everybody with the black or the gay or the right. I can be blasting everybody and glowing and expanding in all directions as I encourage them to do the same thing. And that's being unapologetically me. And I'm doing that by listening. I don't have
mhm.
to always be speaking. I don't
Yeah.
always have to be moving. I don't always have to be working. There's so many things that we get to do as human beings. And
Mhm.
that's the real essence of biggest, fullest, and brightest. Are we truly living up to our human potential
Yeah.
when we're caught in this mindset that there is a group that is superior to another group, that our well-being and our worth is based on that oppression of another person?
Mhm, mhm,
What if we were all just giving energy to one another and helping each other be our authentic, truthful self and empowering each other to do that and listening to each other's stories? What can we become then? Because that has not happened yet. And I
right.
want to see what happens when we do that.
Yeah.
I believe and I have faith in the energies that have been occurring in me after all this work that I've been doing and how I'm viewing the world and myself and other people and giving that grace and giving myself grace. And that more and more, it's just this heart open, supporting and loving humanity instead of going, wow, humanity is messed up. Look at what we did here, and look at what's happened there, and look at what's going on there. You know, it's like, well, why are we solving our problems that way? Why can't we solve them from an unapologetically me perspective, from our biggest and brightest?
Definitely. I think that's really, really good. I think because also the energy we give really matters. And I say that I have to speak to me too, because I give energy that comes. I'll give it back at times. So
Yes.
just pray for me. I need work on that sometimes myself. But it's so important to operate in the energy of that higher vibration, that growth and that development, that being able to shine as your fullest, biggest, and brightest, right? And so I absolutely love what you shared. And that's what we all get to step into.
Yes.
We do. Yeah, to create something better for us all, for all of humanity.
Yes.
Yes,
Please. Yes,
definitely.
please.
Yes, definitely. So Matthew, I know people can pre-order your book still
Mhm.
by going to boldenfieldspublishing.com. They can click on Matthew Reynolds or latest release and grab your book. Um, is there anything else you want to share with those who may be joining us here on?
Oh, I feel that the biggest thing, especially after today's conversation, is may we all have the courage, the strength, the clarity to fully step into that authenticity that's inside of all of us, that isn't dictated by outside stimuli of what we should be, but really comes from that inner place of who we truly are. And as we move that into the world, may we all expand into our biggest, fullest, and brightest.
Definitely. Thank you, Matthew. This is our opportunity to do just that. And thank you for the book. Thank you for your time today, interviewing with me about unapologetically me, about your family and growth and development, faith in you, belief in you, and the work that you're doing. So appreciate it. Thank you so much, Matthew. And you
Thank you.
all you're welcome. And those of you who are here on our YouTube page, we'll be back again. We'll be doing another interview with Matthew, and also we'll be back with more content about creating and living, and creating your path to success, and living in life with your worth, right? Building that up. So we'll be back to share more about that. So thank you, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.